Hey there. Under the soft hush of twilight, you find yourself standing in the middle of Carnusti farmland, eastern Scotland. The grass is cool and slick beneath your boots, and the air is steeped in the earthy scent of soil that's just beginning to breathe after a light rain. You can almost feel the land holding a secret, something immense tucked away just below the surface. Tonight, you are not just a visitor. You are a witness to a mystery that's been waiting over 6,000 years to be revealed. You shuffle your feet, feeling the uneven ground beneath you. Locals have always called this place ordinary, just another patchwork of green fields and old stone walls. But tonight, everything feels different. The breeze carries a hint of wood smoke, as if some long-vanished fire is still smouldering in the darkness. Shadows lengthen across the field, and you sense the weight of history pressing from below, urging you to look deeper. Now, here's the twist that will keep you awake. What lies beneath your boots may completely rewrite the story of early civilization in Britain. The secret is so big, so unexpected, that even the archaeologists on site are still half convinced they're dreaming. And before you drift off, you'll hear about a discovery so dramatic, it might just change the way we see ancient Europe. If you love wandering into the unknown, or just enjoy curling up with a good story about lost worlds, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if this kind of adventure is truly your thing. And hey, let's make this a global bedtime gathering. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. It's amazing to think we're all connecting under the same sky, at the edge of sleep and history. So, dim the lights, pull the blanket a little tighter, and let your mind settle in. You are about to step into a world where the past hums beneath your feet, silent but restless. Take a deep breath. The journey begins here. You stand in the middle of Carnusti farmland in eastern Scotland, boots pressing into grass that ripples under a restless sky. It's now, but the atmosphere hums with the weight of something hidden just beneath your feet. Locals have always called this land ordinary, just another patchwork of fields. But today, there's a hush, as if the earth itself is holding its breath. The air is cool and earthy, and you catch the faint scent of damp soil rising up. This is a place that keeps its secrets well. You glance over at the dig team. Their voices are low, almost reverent. Someone kneels and brushes away the top layer of sod, revealing a patchwork of darker soil. You crouch beside them, fingertips grazing the cold earth. The sensation is oddly grounding. You realize you're touching the same ground. Neolithic people once walked, thousands of years before electricity, before iron, before even the idea of written history. The archaeologist beside you grins, eyes wide with excitement that barely masks exhaustion. It looked like nothing, she says, nodding at the field. But the radar lit up like a Christmas tree. You lean closer, peering into the shallow trench. Patterns emerge, long, straight lines, almost too regular to be natural. The team murmurs about anomalies, about shapes that suggest human design. There are stories in these lines, you think, if only you can listen closely enough. A sudden gust of wind rattles the tools laid out nearby. The scent of damp wood and old grass fills your lungs. Someone calls out, "They've found a post hole, perfectly round, cut deep into the clay." You reach down and trace its edge. The timber that once stood here is long gone, but its impression remains, a fossilized memory of ancient construction. The team marks each hole, mapping out a structure far larger than you expect. You step back and squint, imagining the outline of a massive hall stretching across the field. The scale is staggering. This isn't just a hut or a simple shelter. This is monumental. A place that would have dominated the landscape. A gathering point for a community you can barely imagine. Here comes your first twist. Under what looked like an ordinary farm, you're standing on the remains of a Neolithic timber hall, possibly among the earliest monuments of its kind in Britain. The realization settles in, heavy and exhilarating. What was once just dirt is now a portal into a lost world. You pause, letting the enormity of the discovery sink in. This changes everything. If people were building structures like this so early, what else were they capable of? What stories have we been missing? A few meters away, another trench reveals shallow grooves crisscrossing the soil. The archaeologist waves you over. Partitions, she says, voice almost trembling. You can see where they divided the hall. Maybe for storage, sleeping, meetings, we don't know yet. You crouch to inspect the marks, your fingertips collecting grains of ancient clay. The grooves are faint but deliberate, like the quiet signatures of a people determined to organize their space. You look up at the field, picturing the hall rising from the earth. The timbers would have been thick and rough, shaped by hand. You run your hand along a splintered beam unearthed nearby, noticing the distinctive chisel marks. The wood is scarred but sturdy, each groove carved by a stone tool thousands of years ago. Imagine the labor, entire forests cleared by people wielding nothing but polished stone axes. You picture the sweat and grit, the rhythmic thud of axe on wood echoing through the dawn. Trees fall, branches stripped, trunks hauled by teams of determined builders. The forest recedes, and in its place rises a structure meant to last. You can almost hear the sounds, the distant shouts, the crackle of ancient fires, the thump of logs dragged across muddy ground. The air is thick with the smell of sap and fresh-cut wood. For a moment you are one of them, shoulder to shoulder with the first architects of Scotland. The dig leader explains, "These people didn't just survive. They planned, built, and gathered. They shaped the land." You nod, realizing you are standing not just in a field, but at the heart of a vanished community. A cluster of charred seeds and animal bones turns up near the hall's entrance. You crouch to examine them, the soft crunch of earth beneath your knees. Early Neolithic communities began cultivating crops and raising cattle here. The seeds are tiny, but they tell a huge story. This was a place of feasting, of family, of shared labor and celebration. You pause for a breath. The hush of history presses in, broken only by the quiet murmur of the dig team. There's a sense of awe, as if you stumbled onto a sacred ground. The stakes are obvious. If this hall is as old and significant as it seems, the entire narrative of British prehistory could shift. Maybe people here were more organized, more connected than anyone thought. The wind picks up again, and you wrap your jacket a little tighter. The air tastes of peat and distant rain. You brush dust from your hands, thinking about the thousands of lives that unfolded right where you stand. It's humbling. The past feels close enough to touch. Every few minutes, someone finds something new. A shard of pottery here, a flint blade there. Each object is a puzzle piece, and the picture is getting clearer. But the biggest questions remain. Who built this hall? Why here? And what happened to the people who gathered beneath its roof? You feel a shiver, not from the cold, but from the sense of standing at a threshold. The story is only beginning to unfold. What else lies hidden in the shadows beneath the grass? You keep your eyes open and your senses sharp. The night is deepening, but the mystery is just beginning to wake. A few steps away, a team unfurls a ground, penetrating radar rig, rolling it slowly over the field. Carnusti farmland, morning. A crew of archaeologists and you stand in the dew-soaked grass, boots leaving soft prints on the field. You watch as a team carefully unfurls the ground, penetrating radar, its metal arms glinting in the weak Scottish sun. The rig hums and rolls, tracing slow, deliberate lines over the earth. The display screen flickers, then steadies, revealing a lattice of pale lines and dark rectangles that pulse with every pass. You lean in, squinting at the readout. There, symmetrical patterns emerge, forming crisp rows and parallel lines. These aren't the wild, wandering marks of roots or stones. They are too precise, too intentional. The screen is whispering a secret, and you are among the first to hear it. The land is not just soil and grass. It is telling you that something was built here, not simply born from the earth. You take a step back, letting the earthy scent of damp soil fill your lungs. The radar's lines are straight, unwavering. You know natural geology never does that. It's like finding a straight-edged Lego brick in a pile of river stones. Every instinct says, this is not nature's doing. You glance at Isla, the field lead, and see the same realization in her eyes. She grins, but her voice is low. We're not just looking at a random scatter, she says. This is a blueprint. As the radar sweeps again, the shapes sharpen. You make out patterns, a broad rectangle, flanked by evenly spaced lines. It looks eerily like the floor plan of a massive building. Your mind races. A timber hall, perhaps. The kind of structure that, until now, existed only in scattered finds and hopeful guesses. Here, on Carnusti's farmland, you're standing above what might be one of the oldest monuments in Britain. A breeze tugs at your sleeves, carrying the scent of grass and the distant tang of the North Sea. You kneel, pressing a palm to the ground. Imagine, just below your fingertips, the remnants of timber posts, once towering overhead. The echoes of ancient fires seem to linger, tucked into the hush beneath your boots. For a moment, the modern world feels paper-thin, and the early Neolithic is close enough to touch. The team marks out the radar lines with neon flags, their colors outlandish against the muted field. You trace the rectangle's perimeter, counting your steps. It is enormous, far larger than any farmhouse or barn you've seen in this part of Scotland. The dimensions hint at something built for more than one family. This was a gathering place, a hall for dozens, maybe hundreds. As you follow the flagged-out line, the sense of scale becomes overwhelming. If these lines are timber foundations, then the builders had ambition. This isn't just a hut, it's a statement. And if it's as old as the earliest Neolithic finds, it means communities in this region were planning, organizing, and constructing on a scale that rewrites the story of early British civilization. You pause at what must have been an entrance. The radar map shows a break in the pattern, a small square just outside the main rectangle. The ground here feels subtly different underfoot. Isla calls you over. "Look at this," she says, pointing to the display. "That cluster beside the gap may be paving stones." You kneel and run your fingers across the grass. The air is cool and heavy with the promise of rain. You imagine the slap of stone beneath your boots, a paved entryway leading into the vast timber hall. The paving would have set the tone. This was a place of ceremony, of importance, not just a shelter from the wind. The team begins plotting out test trenches. As the first shovels break the sod, the smell of fresh earth rises, sharp and mineral. The anticipation is electric. You can almost hear the low murmur of ancient voices, the crackle of a fire, the thud of footsteps on oak planks. You picture the builders, early Neolithic settlers, strong-armed and stubborn, hauling massive oak logs across the field. Each timber was chosen with care, its bark stripped, its trunk shaped to fit a precise spot in the hall's framework. There are no power tools here, just stone axes, sweat, and relentless coordination. Every post hole detected by the radar lines up with intention. Nothing is random. The symmetry is uncanny. You realize that this structure required planning and teamwork. No lone family could have managed it. This was a community project, built by a group with a shared vision and a clear plan. You rise and dust your knees, glancing at the flagged perimeter. The field, once just a patchwork of barley and wildflowers, now feels charged with purpose. You catch Isla's eye again. She nods, as if reading your thoughts. "This changes everything," she says quietly. You feel a jolt of excitement. If this is what it seems, a massive, complex timber hall, among the oldest known in Britain, then the story of early Scotland is about to be rewritten. Communities here were not just scratching out a living. They were organizing, building, and dreaming big. A low, distant rumble interrupts your thoughts. Clouds gather, casting the field into a deep, green hush. The atmosphere thickens. You can almost sense the weight of thousands of years pressing down, the memory of hands shaping timber, the hush of history beneath your boots. The radar crew finishes their pass. You gather around the display. Isla points to a dense cluster of lines in one corner. "See that?" Says, "If those are post holes, the largest timbers went here, maybe a central hearth or a raised platform." You imagine the heat of ancient fires, smoke spiraling into the rafters, the oily scent of burning wood. Hands pass bowls, voices rise and fall. This was not just a shelter, but a place where people came together, where stories and rituals took shape. You run a hand over the flagged ground, feeling the roughness of grass and the coolness of soil. In your mind's eye, the grass parts and the timber hall rises, massive oaks, perfectly aligned, each one shaped and set with care. The precision is startling. No haphazard construction here. Each timber was chosen for a reason. each one shaped and positioned just so. You wonder about the people who gathered here. Did they argue over where to place the entrance? Did they celebrate when the roof beam was finally lifted into place? The evidence suggests a level of organization and social complexity far beyond what anyone expected from this time. You take a slow breath, letting the earthy smells and distant bird calls anchor you to the present. The stakes are enormous. If the evidence holds, this discovery could force archaeologists to rethink everything they know about the origins of complex communities in Europe. A sudden gust scatters the neon flags, a reminder that the field is still alive, still hiding its secrets. You gather the markers, heart pounding with the thrill of the unknown. The radar rig is packed away, but the patterns linger in your mind. The symmetry, the scale, the deliberate design, they point to a truth that is both thrilling and humbling. You are standing at the threshold of a story that has waited thousands of years to be told. You walk the perimeter one last time, boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. Every step is a reminder. History is not just something you read about. Sometimes it is something you stand on, something you uncover with your own hands. You look up as a gull wheels overhead, its call echoing across the Carnusti fields. For a moment, the modern world fades, and you are there, inside the hall. The rough timber under your fingertips, the warmth of the fire at your back, the voices of ancient builders all around. The day is just beginning, and the story beneath your boots is only starting to unfold. Carnusti farmland, early Neolithic, morning haze clings to the grass, and you are crouched at the edge of a shallow trench with two archaeologists, your breath fogging in the chill. The air is dense with the smell of wet soil, and every movement stirs up a hint of mossy, ancient earth. Your gloved hand, gritty and cold, closes around the handle of the trowel as you scrape at a stubborn patch of dark soil. The others beside you are silent, focused, as each new clump of dirt peels away like wrapping paper from a long-lost gift. Then, there it is. A dull thud travels up your wrist. You freeze. The edge of your trowel has struck something that isn't stone, but isn't quite soft earth either. You brush it gently with your fingertips and find the coarse grain of a timber, blackened by age, but unmistakably shaped by human hands. For a moment, the past is not a story or a theory. It is right here, under your glove. You look up, and one of the archaeologists, Dr. Sutherland, grins wide enough to crease mud across her cheek. She whispers, as if afraid to wake the spirits of the place. That's Neolithic wood. You're touching 6,000 years. The dig crew gathers, breath steaming, as you all widen the trench. Each careful stroke reveals more. A line of timbers, their ends squared off with surprising precision. The wood is darker than the earth around it, a faint scent of old fires clinging to the grain. You can almost hear the echo of axes biting into trunks, and in your mind's eye, a forest falls under the hands of people determined to build something lasting. You glance up at the rolling green fields that stretch toward the horizon. Hard to believe that beneath these sheep pastures lies a structure larger than a modern house, hidden for millennia under layers of turf and silence. The stakes are suddenly clear. If this hall is as old and as large as the radar hinted, Everything you thought you knew about Neolithic Britain might have to change. The crew lays out string and stakes to map the outline. Each timber is carefully measured, every position marked on a muddy grid. The pattern emerges, a rectangle, massive in scale, with rounded corners and wide post holes sunk deep into the clay. You reach out and trace the edge of a timber, the surface rough beneath your fingertips, and realize that every log was chosen, hauled, and set by people who planned for generations. Nothing is accidental here. The posts are aligned with geometric care, forming a framework that would have towered over the landscape. A sudden gust rattles the plastic covers over the trench, and you shiver, not just from the cold, but from the uncanny feeling of standing in a place where history is literally under your boots. You can almost hear the low hum of voices, the smack of stone axes, the crackle of a communal fire. Dr. Sutherland points out a scatter of pottery sherds at the edge of the trench. The fragments are thick and gritty, decorated with simple chord impressions. She explains, "This pottery wasn't just for show. They used it to store grain, to hold water or ale, signs that these people were settled, not just wandering hunters." You find yourself picturing the daily life of Carnusti's ancient builders. You imagine the rhythmic swing of polished stone axes as they clear the dense Scottish woodland, sweat beading on their brows, the air sweet with sap and wood smoke. Each tree felled becomes a beam, each beam a piece of a communal puzzle. The work is slow, deliberate, and takes more than just muscle. It demands planning, cooperation, and a vision of a future that stretches beyond one lifetime. The hall's footprint grows with every scrape of the trowel. You step back and realize you're standing inside what would have been a cavernous space, roughly the size of a modern tennis court. The scale is jaw-dropping. Imagine a village gathering here, dozens of families, the air thick with the aroma of roasting meat, the glow of firelight flickering against timber walls. This is not a temporary camp. This is a monument to ambition and organization, built before metal ever touched the land. A sudden silence falls as one of the diggers uncovers the remains of a hearth, an ashy patch ringed by fire-cracked stones. The scent of burnt wood lingers in the soil, as if the last embers never quite died out. You crouch beside it, closing your eyes for a moment, and try to picture the hands that kindled those flames. What stories did they tell? What rituals? What feasts? The tension in the air is almost electric. Every new find, a shard of decorated pottery, a post hole filled with charcoal, a sliver of animal bone, layers the mystery. You realize that this hall was more than a shelter. It was the beating heart of a community, a place where people gathered, argued, celebrated, and mourned. The evidence is overwhelming. The scale, the planning, the careful placement of every timber. Someone dreamed this place into being, and a whole village made it real. Now, here comes a twist that nobody expected. As you help clear the last of the turf from the far end of the trench, your trowel scrapes against something surprisingly smooth. You brush away the soil and reveal what appears to be an axe head, polished to a dark green shine, sharper than you'd ever guess for something this old. Dr. Sutherland's eyes go wide. These axes weren't just tools. They were symbols. Clearing this much forest would have taken generations. These people were investing in the land for their children's children. You pause. The consequence is clear. Every artifact found here raises the bar for what we thought Neolithic communities could accomplish. This isn't just a lucky village. This is civilization. 6,000 years ago, rewriting the map of ancient Europe. A breeze stirs across the open trench, carrying the scent of earth and smoke. And for a moment you feel the hush of history all around you. You kneel in the damp clay, ancient timber beneath your hand, and realize you are no longer just looking at the past. You are standing inside it. The dig continues, but the outline of the hall is unmistakable now, a ghostly rectangle traced in earth and wood, hinting at stories still buried deeper. As you stand, boots squelching in the mud, you can't help but wonder, what else waits beneath these Scottish fields, still hidden, still holding its breath? The scene shifts. The trench is wider, the outline of the hall more complete. The next layer of discovery is about to begin. Carnusti farmland, eastern Scotland, early morning, your boots sinking into the dew-heavy grass beside the widening trench. It is only you and the distant calls of rooks. The sun is just beginning to burn away the mist, revealing the patient work of days, weeks, etched into the earth. As you kneel down, your hands hover over the shadowy outline of something immense. This is not a spot for a humble shelter. Right now, you are tracing history with your fingertips. The ground here smells rich and loamy, a little sweet and a little sour. The scent of centuries. Your fingers brush over the top of a timber post, still coarse and ridged after thousands of years. The wood is dark and splintered, yet its grain is stubbornly clear. You draw your hand along the line where post after post rises. Well, once rose, marching away into the soil like a parade frozen in time. You imagine the original timbers towering overhead, forming the bones of a structure that could swallow your entire living room, and then some. The scale hits you. The outline in the dirt keeps going, stretching out until you have to step back to take it all in. It is roughly the size of a modern tennis court, a rectangle defined by rows of what would have been massive posts, straight as soldiers. This is not a garden shed, not a hut, not even a farmhouse. This is a monument, built by hands that knew only stone and wood, sweat and patience. A breeze stirs, carrying the earthy smell of damp soil, and something faintly charred, maybe just your imagination, or maybe the ghost of ancient fires long since cooled. You press your palm to another timber, feeling the texture beneath your skin. The roughness is interrupted by a series of shallow grooves. Each groove is a story in itself, carved with stone tools by someone who stood right where you are. No metal, no machines. Just stone against wood, muscle and grit shaping a future no one could see. As the trench is slowly peeled back, more details emerge. You spot shards of pottery nestled among the roots, their surfaces decorated with crosshatches and simple lines. Some pieces are the size of your palm, others barely a thumbnail. Nearby, a patch of earth yields a scatter of darkened stones, evidence of ancient gatherings. You picture people huddled around a fire here, their laughter and voices echoing off the timber walls. These weren't isolated farmers, you realize. This hall was a place for crowds, for feasts, maybe even for ceremonies that echoed late into the night. Then, a sudden twist. Along one side of the structure, you uncover a patch of tightly fitted stones. They form a kind of rough paving, leading toward what must have been an entrance. The stones are cold and slick with morning dew, but you can see how they would have kept mud at bay when the Scottish weather turned wild. A threshold that says, "Here is a place worth caring for." You pause, letting the significance settle. This is not just a building, but a statement. It tells you that the people who built it were organized, that they planned and worked together, that they understood something about comfort and community. The scale alone changes what you thought you knew about Neolithic Britain. Until now, most believed these people lived small, scattered lives, their days ruled by survival. But this hall points to something else: ambition, cooperation, maybe even a sense of legacy. The wind shifts, and suddenly you catch a whiff of peat and distant sea. It could be your mind playing tricks, or maybe it is the same scent those ancient builders knew. You imagine the scene thousands of years ago. Men and women hauling timber from the nearby woods, the crack of stone axes, the calls of children darting between piles of earth. Someone is tending a fire, smoke curling into the rafters. The rhythms of daily life play out within these walls: eating, storytelling, planning, mourning. The echoes are all around you if you listen closely enough. A pattern emerges beneath the surface. The pottery styles you find are not quite local. Some bear markings that hint at distant origins. You recall stories of farming techniques and traditions traveling north, carried by waves of migration and trade. This place is not isolated. It is connected, a node in a web that stretched across ancient Europe. The hall itself, with its careful design and monumental scale, is proof that ideas and people flowed into this corner of Scotland. For a moment, everything is still. You stand in the center of the buried hall, the hush of history pressing in on all sides. Each breath draws in the scent of old wood and damp clay. Your boots disturb the dust that has not moved for millennia. You try to picture the first time this space filled with light, the first time a fire was lit in the center, the first time voices rose in a song or an argument. Then, another shift. As you examine the posts more closely, you spot faint marks, the signature of stone axes, each stroke deliberate and rough. No two cuts are the same, like fingerprints left behind by the builders. You run your thumb along the edge of a groove and think about the time it must have taken, the calluses earned, the plans sketched in the mind rather than on paper. It is a reminder of how much can be built with simple tools when there is vision and will. You look up, imagining the hall as it once was. Massive beams overhead, smoke drifting lazily between the rafters. The sound of footsteps on the stone paving, the clatter of pottery, the flicker of torchlight against the walls. The air is thick with the mingled smells of earth, wood smoke, and people. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the echoes of their lives. A new realization settles in. What you have uncovered here could rewrite the story of early British civilization. This is not a fringe settlement, but a place of gathering, of ritual, of community. Its very existence challenges the old idea that early Scots were simply scattered farmers clinging to survival. Instead, you see evidence of planning, connection, and perhaps even the earliest seeds of what would become society as we know it. The consequence is clear. The story of Carnusti is no longer just about a field or a ruin. It is about the birth of something bigger, a reminder that even in the Stone Age, people dreamed and built and gathered in ways that still echo beneath our feet. Running your hand along one of the oak beams, you feel the ridges left by stone tools, each groove a fingerprint from a world without metal. Carnusti farmland, early Neolithic, you and the excavation team crouch beneath the low Scottish sky, inside the ghostly outline of a timber hall. You kneel, and your hand presses against the broad side of an ancient oak beam, tracing the shallow grooves left by stone blades. The wood is cool and surprisingly smooth, but you can still feel the uneven ridges, each one a signature from a world that never knew metal. Imagine for a moment every beam here, as thick as your thigh, was once a living giant in a forest that stretched for miles, felled and shaped by careful hands wielding axes of polished stone. The smell of damp earth rises up from the trench, mixing with the sharp tang of wood that's lain buried for millennia. You glance down at your boots, half expecting to see the print of someone who walked these floors 4,000 years before you. The silence beneath the surface is heavy, broken only by the muffled scrape of a trowel and the distant call of a curlew. It's easy to picture the original builders here, sleeves rolled, sweat dripping as they levered each timber upright, not with machines, but with ropes, brute strength, and the kind of teamwork you might see on a rugby pitch. Each post is planted with deliberate care, forming lines and angles that echo the logic of a modern frame house. Except this structure was raised in the Stone Age, long before many later stone monuments. You reach up and run your fingers along a joint where two beams meet. The join is tight, as if the wood has grown together, but you spot more of those telltale marks, tiny notches, shallow channels, the unmistakable work of hand tools. Here, the past leaves evidence you can touch. The oak feels dense and solid, nothing like the splintering pine from a modern lumber yard. Every beam was shaped and sized to fit just so, using nothing but stone axes and chisels. The patience required is staggering. If you tried to cut through a tree this size with a flint blade, it would take hours, maybe days. Yet every timber in this hall was chosen, carved, and raised to form a single, unified space. You can almost hear the teamwork, the grunt of effort as the timber tips into its socket, the shouted instructions, laughter, maybe even a burst of song to keep the rhythm. The ancient forests that once blanketed eastern Scotland provided the raw material, but it took a community to transform those trunks into shelter. The result is a hall that feels both monumental and intimate, a structure big enough to gather dozens of people, yet still shaped by hand and heart. You notice the floor seems slightly raised in the middle, sloping gently toward the edges, perhaps to help with drainage, or maybe to emphasize the center of the room. This was no rough hut. It was a masterpiece of Neolithic engineering crafted by people who understood both the materials and the land itself. Suddenly, the wind shifts, and you catch a faint, earthy aroma, something charred, almost sweet, drifting from a shallow pit near the center of the hall. You move closer, and the soil under your knees turns black and crumbly, flecked with fragments of ancient charcoal. The pit is ringed by stones, their edges worn smooth by countless fires. This was the communal hearth, the beating heart of the timber hall. The evidence is everywhere: layers of soot, scorched earth, and the remains of roasted animal bones. You pick up a shard and turn it over in your palm. It is the rib of a deer, cracked and blackened, a leftover from a feast that took place when the pyramids were still just a dream. This is where the story of the hall comes alive. The hearth was more than a place to cook. It was a gathering point, a source of warmth, light, and stories. The smoke would have curled up into the rafters, mingling with the aroma of roasting meat and the tang of fresh-cut wood. You can almost see the flicker of firelight on the faces of those gathered: farmers, hunters, children, elders, each with a role to play in this ancient community. You shift your position and notice more details: the faint outline of post holes forming a circle within the hall, suggesting an inner sanctum or perhaps a raised platform. In one corner, the soil is lighter, speckled with tiny shards of pottery. These fragments, rough to the touch, hint at the everyday life of the people who lived here. Someone once shaped these bowls from river clay, pinching and smoothing them with calloused fingers, then left them to dry by the fire. Pottery was a new technology in Neolithic Britain, a sign that this community was on the cutting edge, at least for its time. You pause and realize that every layer of earth is a record, every artifact a clue. The consequences of these discoveries are clear. The Carnusti Hall was not just a shelter, but a hive of activity, innovation, and social order. You look up, and for a moment, the grassy field above seems to fade away. You are surrounded by the sounds of the ancient world, the crackle of a fire, the low murmur of voices, the distant howl of a wolf on the edge of the forest. Outside, you imagine hunters slipping through the trees, bows strung and eyes sharp, stalking deer and wild boar. The forest would have been dense, tangled, alive with the movement of animals and the whisper of wind through oak leaves. The hunters return at dusk, their catch slung over broad shoulders, greeted by the welcoming glow of the hall. Inside, others tend to the livestock, shaggy cattle and nimble sheep, penned just outside the main door. The air is thick with the smell of animals, straw, and damp earth. Someone kneels by the fire, grinding grain with a stone quern. Another shapes a new flint axe, chips flying as the edge is honed. The tasks are divided, but the sense of purpose is shared. Each person belongs to a network of roles: herder, potter, builder, toolmaker. This is not a loose band of wanderers, but a true community, organized and efficient, capable of building something enduring. Just as you begin to imagine the daily rhythm of life, you spot a curious detail: a ridge in the soil where the thatch once met the timber, preserved in a thin line of dark organic matter. The roof, you realize, was not just a cap of reeds, but a carefully layered structure designed to shed rain and resist wind. The engineering is sophisticated, even by modern standards. The thatch would have muffled the sound of rain, kept the warmth in, and provided shelter through the bitter Scottish winters. The smell of smoke and wet grass would have clung to every surface, seeping into clothing, hair, and even the grain stored in woven baskets. This small detail changes your perspective. The Carnusti Hall was not a temporary camp, but a place meant to last, a home, a gathering place, a monument to what a unified community could achieve. Stepping back, you take in the full sweep of the timber frame. The posts stand in silent rows, their shadows stretching across the dark earth. You realize that the layout is not random. Each timber was set with intention, marking boundaries, shaping space, and perhaps even reflecting the beliefs of those who built it. The hall is both practical and symbolic, a testament to the power of collective effort and shared vision. The people who lived here were not just surviving, they were building a future. You wonder, as you brush the soil from your hands, what other secrets lie buried beneath these fields. The timber hall at Carnusti is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, a clue that could rewrite what we think we know about the origins of civilization in Britain. Did these ancient engineers inspire others? Did their ideas travel, spreading across the land like ripples on a pond? The answers are still hidden, waiting for the next lucky hand to brush them free. The scent of charred earth drifts to you from the hall's center, where blackened stones and layers of soot mark ancient hearths. You feel the hush of history settle around you, thick as the Scottish mist, and the story of Carnusti is only just beginning. Carnusti farmland, dawn, cool air curling around your ankles as you crouch in the heart of the ancient timber hall. You breathe in, and the scent of charred earth seeps into your nostrils, a sharp, smoky tang, as if the fire just died out moments ago. The grass outside is slick with dew, but here, inside the outline of the hall, the soil feels different. Beneath your fingertips, you sense the gritty edge of blackened stones, each one caked with layers of soot. These are not just random rocks, they are witnesses, marking the very hearth where flames once danced and warmed, a gathering that you can almost hear now. This is not an empty ruin, it is a memory burned deep into the land. You look up, and the shadowed outline of the rectangular hall takes shape in your mind. The posts, massive, ancient oaks, stood in two neat rows, perfectly spaced, each sunk into the ground at almost identical depths. Someone, thousands of years ago, measured and planned this with a precision that feels startlingly modern. Imagine swapping your laser level for a knotted cord and a sharp eye, yet the results are just as straight, just as intentional. As you brush away loose soil, your hand closes around the curve of a pottery shard. It is rough, gritty, and heavier than you expect. The pattern is faint but deliberate, pressed in with a stick or maybe a fingernail. A few steps away, a cluster of animal bones fans out like the spokes of a wheel. Some are broken, split to reveal the rich marrow inside. You spot a dull glimmer in the dirt, a scatter of ancient grain, still clinging together in small clusters. The smell here is earthy, with a faint undertone of something toasted, like the crust of bread left too long near the fire. You pause, letting your eyes adjust to the morning light filtering through the grass above. The layout of the hall is simple, but massive, more than anything you have seen from this era in Scotland. Each timber was not just any log hauled from the woods. Every oak was selected, shaped, and set with care, as if the builders wanted the hall itself to last forever. You run your hand along the ghost of one post, and the surface still feels ridged, marked by stone axes and the pressure of ancient hands. Suddenly, a gust of wind stirs the grass, and the smell of smoke intensifies. For a moment you are transported. The air is thick with the aroma of roasting meat, and the low murmur of voices rises. You picture families crowded around the hearth, laughter echoing off the walls, children darting between the posts, the glow of firelight flickering across painted faces. The hall is alive, not just with survival, but with celebration. Someone is baking bread on a flat stone, and the yeasty scent mingles with the sharp tang of wood smoke. You realize this was never just a shelter. It was the beating heart of a community, a stage for feasts, storytelling, and ritual. A sudden metallic flash snaps you back. Just outside the main hearth, you spot a sliver of something bright, a fragment of pottery perhaps, but glazed with a sheen that catches the sun. It is nothing like the dull earthiness of the other shards. The pattern is unfamiliar, almost foreign. Maybe it was traded from far away, or maybe it marks a special guest at one of these ancient feasts. You wonder, did this community reach farther than you thought? The possibility shivers through you, tingling in your fingertips. For a moment, the boundaries of the Neolithic world seem to widen. The ground here is soft, churned by centuries of roots and plows, but beneath your boots you feel the hush of history. Every step presses deeper into the story. The grain, the bones, the charred stones, all tell the same tale. This was a place of gathering, where food was shared, and stories grew larger with each retelling. The evidence is everywhere. Pottery shards cluster near the hearth, their edges worn smooth. Animal bones pile up in corners, some still marked by the cuts of flint blades. Stray seeds crunch under your weight, a reminder that grain was precious, hoarded and cherished, maybe even fermented for ale. You move toward the edge of the hall, and here the timber posts seem to close in. The spacing is exact, every post set apart like teeth in a massive wooden comb. You kneel by one, brushing away dirt. The oak is petrified now, but you can still make out the careful shaping. Someone spent hours, days, carving this timber to fit just so. The rest of the hall follows suit, each post echoing the same rhythm, the same intent. Suddenly, a distant buzz breaks the spell. You glance up to see a drone circling overhead, its camera lens glinting as it captures the pattern of the post holes from above. The discovery here has not gone unnoticed. News of this site has rippled outward, drawing reporters and archaeologists from across Britain and beyond. The field is no longer quiet. Now, microphones and notepads jostle for space alongside trowels and brushes. The story of this timber hall is about to leap from the soil into the headlines, igniting curiosity on a scale the original builders could never have imagined. You let yourself breathe. Just for a moment, the world has changed. What was once hidden beneath layers of earth and centuries of silence is now a puzzle for everyone to solve. The stakes are high. If this is truly one of the oldest monumental buildings in Britain, then the story of civilization here is about to be rewritten. The evidence at your feet is not just a collection of artifacts. It is a challenge to everything you thought you knew about the origins of community, leadership, and celebration in Neolithic Europe. You listen. The wind rustles the grass, and for a heartbeat, you hear the echoes of ancient laughter. Here, in the Carnusti farmland, the story is only beginning to unfold. Carnusti farmland, early Neolithic morning, you and two archaeologists kneel inside the timber hall, breath visible in the cool Scottish air. Your boots crunch over the packed dirt, tracing the faint grooves that snake through the floor. Some of these shallow tracks run parallel, others branch off at odd angles, and you realize they do not match the main beam placements at all. Instead, these lines seem to carve out separate sections, as if someone long ago decided that one vast room was not enough. You pause, fingertips brushing over the rough timber outline of a post hole sunk deep into the earth. The wood itself is long gone, but the dark, damp soil tells you exactly where it stood and how firmly it was set. You move between these ghostly markers, noticing their rhythm. Each post hole is spaced just so, not haphazard, but with the steady hand of someone who measured and planned. You picture a Neolithic builder, perhaps with a cord of twisted grass, aligning each post with practical precision. Here, you are not standing in a simple hut. You are walking through the blueprint of a purpose-built space, a place divided by intention, not accident. Near the eastern entrance, your boot nudges something firmer than soil. You kneel, fingers scraping away the top layer of earth, and reveal a patchwork of uneven stones. These slabs, still cold and slick with morning dew, form a narrow path leading into the hall. The paving is rough but deliberate, each stone chosen for its flatness and heft. You imagine the feet of many people treading this very path, their movement slowly polishing the stone with the passing of years. The earthy smell here is stronger, mixed with the faint tang of old ash and something almost sweet, maybe the decayed memory of ancient grain. The air is still, broken only by the distant caw of a rook beyond the field. It is easy to forget the modern world above you, with its tractors and phone signals, and easy to slip into the hush of history that lingers beneath your boots. As you follow the grooves deeper into the hall, you spot fragments of pottery, half buried in the loam. The clay is coarse, worked by hand, with the faintest impression of cord wrapped around the rim. You lift a broken piece, its surface rough beneath your thumb, and realize it was once part of a jar, maybe used to store barley, or to keep water cool through the summer heat. Pottery like this is not just decoration. It is the ancient equivalent of storage ware, a solution for storing grains and liquids when you cannot run to the corner shop. Next to the pottery, you notice a flint blade, chipped sharp on one side, and a bone awl, worn smooth from use. These tools tell you about daily life here, cooking, weaving, maybe even carving wooden tokens for ritual. Every object you find is a message from someone who stood in this very spot, hands busy, mind focused on survival or ceremony. You glance up, picturing the hall at its peak. Smoke from a central fire would have curled into the beams, scenting the air with peat and wood smoke. The walls, partitioned by those missing screens or planks, might have muffled the laughter of children or the low murmurs of a council meeting. You imagine the flicker of firelight on painted faces, the hush before a decision, the weight of stories passed from mouth to ear. Then, as you round a corner, you spot a patch where the soil dips. The archaeologist beside you points out that this may be a burial pit, tucked deliberately beside a post. The bones found here, fragile, curled on their side, may suggest a person placed with care, perhaps someone respected or feared. The burial is a clue. This hall was not just a shelter, but a stage for rituals that blended life and death, work and worship. For a moment, you try to see this place through Neolithic eyes. The partitions cast shadows, dividing the hall into public and private spaces. Maybe one area was reserved for elders, another for communal feasts, a third for sacred rites. The stone paving at the entrance would have felt cool beneath bare feet, a threshold between the everyday and the extraordinary. Every groove and post hole is a reminder that this building was alive with meaning. Suddenly, a distant shout breaks the silence. Outside, a small group of people gathers by the dig perimeter, journalists drawn by word of the discovery. Cameras flash, voices rise, and you realize the quiet of the ancient hall is once again pierced by excitement. The story of Carnusti has escaped the soil and is now rippling across the country, even overseas. That moment marks a change. What was once secret, hidden under centuries of grass and plough, is now front-page news. You feel the stakes rising. Every new feature uncovered, the groove of a partition, the angle of a post, the shard of a pot, could force archaeologists to rewrite the entire story of early British civilization. The evidence here suggests not scattered families, but a complex community that planned, built, and remembered together. You take a breath, letting the earthy smell and the sense of discovery settle in. This is not just a pile of timber and stone. It is a puzzle, half solved, waiting for the next clue to drop into place. The Carnusti Timber Hall hints at a world where the line between home, temple, and council chamber was blurred. As you walk back toward the uneven stone paving, you wonder, what drove these people to build something so ambitious, and to divide it so carefully? Was it power, belief, or the simple need to survive another winter? You cannot know for sure. But you do know that the hall was more than four walls and a roof. It was the heart of a community, layered with secrets, each detail urging you to look closer. The air feels heavier as you approach the entrance again, boots crunching over the grooves and stones. Morning light slants through the open end, picking out flecks of mica in the dirt. You pause, letting your hand rest on the cool, rough edge of a post hole. In this moment, the ancient and the present seem to overlap, history whispering just beneath your fingertips. The discovery of these partitions, the careful paving, and the artifacts scattered throughout the hall all point to a truth that feels both familiar and strange. People here were organized, resourceful, and deeply connected to their land. The Carnusti Hall is not just an archaeological find, it is a paradigm shift. The story you thought you knew about early Britain is changing, right here beneath your boots. You step outside and breathe in the crisp Neolithic air, picturing neighbors tending barley fields, herding cattle, and foraging the wild edges of the woodland. Carnusti farmland, eastern Scotland. Early morning, 4000 BC. You stand shoulder to shoulder with the rest of the settlement, the dew still clinging to your ankles as you step outside the timber hall. The air is sharp, earthy, and alive with the smells of damp soil, and last night's embers. The faint tang of wood smoke lingers, mixing with a deeper grassy scent as you look out over the patchwork of barley fields just beyond the hall's shadow. Neighbours are already at work, their voices muffled by distance and the soft hush of the wind threading through the grass. You feel the rough grain of a wooden door frame beneath your fingertips, a reminder that everything here, even the shelter above your head, was coaxed from the land by hands like yours. Everyone has a job to do. The farmers move in lines hunched over the dark soil, planting barley seeds one careful handful at a time. The rhythm is familiar. Dig, drop, cover, move. You watch a group of herders steering a slow-moving cluster of cattle toward the riverbank. Their sticks tap against the animals' flanks in a steady beat. Every movement is purposeful, each roll essential. The potters crouch near the hall, shaping damp clay into storage jars, their fingers stained ochre. Tool makers sit cross-legged on flat stones, the clack of flint against flint echoing like a heartbeat. You can almost feel the weight of expectation in the air, as if the land itself is watching to see what you will build next. The Carnusti people chose this place carefully. The river bends close, its surface glassy in the morning light. You hear the rush of water over stone, a vital sound. The soil is rich and dark, a gift after the back-breaking work of clearing away ancient trees. With polished stone axes, men and women hacked and dragged until the forest fell away, replaced by small fields and open space for homes. The old tree stumps still dot the horizon, reminders of the wildness that once ruled here. You pause, running your hands over a scarred axe head, feeling the smoothness that only comes from years of use. Farming has changed everything. No more wandering from camp to camp, hoping the season is kind. Here you can stay. Here you can plan for tomorrow. Beneath your boots, the ground holds secrets. You catch the scent of crushed grass and damp earth as you walk the edge of the fields. The woodland is close, its border tangled with brambles and wild flowers. Children dart in and out, baskets slung over their shoulders. They forage for berries, sweet, tart, and bright red against green leaves, and dig for roots in the soft loam. Sometimes they return with mushrooms or the delicate eggs of wild birds. Every meal is a blend of what you grow and what you find. The diet here is simple but rich. Barley cakes, roasted meat, foraged greens, and the occasional treat of honeycomb or nuts. A sudden shout breaks the morning calm. You turn, heart quickening, as a group of farmers gathers near a patch of blackened earth. At the center is a ring of stones, each one stained with soot and ash. The ground smells of old fires, a smoky tang that lingers even after the flames have gone. You crouch beside the stones, fingertips brushing against charred remains. This is a hearth, the heart of the settlement. Here people gather to cook, to talk, to share stories as the sky darkens. The stones are warm even now, holding the memory of countless meals. You imagine laughter, the sizzle of fat over flame, the soft crackle of burning wood. This is where the community comes alive every night. And then, an interruption. Someone calls your name, beckoning you back inside the timber hall. You wipe the dirt from your hands and follow, the sunlight fading as you step beneath the heavy beams. The air inside is smoky, close, and thick with the scents of last night's feast, roasted meat, boiled grains, the faint tang of spilled ale. Pottery shards crunch underfoot as you move deeper into the hall. In one corner, a pile of animal bones gleams white against the packed soil. Nearby, a scatter of barley husks and charred seeds tells its own story. This was more than a meal. This was a gathering. Neighbors, friends, maybe even people from distant settlements, all drawn together by food and fire. For a moment, you close your eyes and listen. The echoes of ancient laughter seem to ripple through the beams overhead. You picture the hall packed with people, the low hum of conversation rising and falling as platters circulate. Children weave between adults, slipping bits of meat from platters, their faces lit by the glow of the hearth. The floor is sticky with spilled drink, the air thick with the aroma of roasting grain. Every detail is a clue, each fragment of pottery and bone a piece of the puzzle. Why did they gather here? Was it a simple feast? Or something more? A ritual, a celebration, a moment that bound the community together? You open your eyes, and the present rushes back in. The hall is empty now, save for the evidence left behind. You kneel, running your fingers over a broken pot rim. The clay is cool and rough, scored with marks from the potter's hands. You wonder if anyone will ever know the whole story. Who sat where, what was said, which songs were sung as the fire burned low. The mystery lingers, heavy as the scent of damp wood and old ash. Outside, the day moves on. You step into the light again, blinking as your eyes adjust. The settlement bustles. Farmers call out across the fields. Herders coax cattle toward the shade. Children laugh as they chase a stray dog into the grass. The air is alive with promise, and the earthy certainty that comes from mastering the land. You know that every role matters: farmer, herder, potter, toolmaker. Each person shapes the world, and is shaped in return. What would it feel like to wake up knowing your work will outlast you? That the timber beams you raise, the fields you plant, the fire you tend, will echo down thousands of years? The answer is buried here, beneath the grass and stone, in the hush of history under your boots. And as you walk the edge of the settlement, you can almost hear the future whispering through the barley, promising more secrets to be uncovered. Out on the edge of the settlement, you hear the ring of stone axes as forests fall away, making space for crops and new homes. Carnusti farmland, early morning, 4000 BC. You and the settlement's builders stand on the edge of a clearing, breath curling in the cool Scottish air as the echo of stone axes rings out. Each swing slices deeper into the dense woodland, the sharp, polished stone catching glints of pale sun before biting into trunks. A tool as smooth as a river-worn pebble, but sharper than looks suggest. The earthy scent of fresh sap mixes with the deep musk of churned soil, and every fallen tree opens a patch of sky above. This is not just hard labor, it is a transformation. Forests give way to wide, muddy spaces that promise a different future. Here, you are not merely surviving, you are making room for something new, something bigger, a community that will last beyond a single lifetime. Now, as the last tree crashes down, you and the others drag the trunks across the spongy ground, leaving trails in the dew. These timbers are the bones of tomorrow's homes, and your hands are raw but determined. A few paces away, a cluster of villagers, faces streaked with sweat and anticipation, begin to lay out the first timber frames. Each log is notched and lifted, then slammed into the mud with a thud that vibrates up through your boots. You push rough bark with your fingertips, feeling the scratch and the promise of shelter. There is laughter as someone's frame teeters, and a gentle shove from a neighbor rights it. This is not just a group effort. It is a choreography. Every move guided by a shared vision you can almost taste in the air. The hall rises, its skeleton stretching wider than you imagined until it dominates the clearing, roughly the size of a modern tennis court. If you squint and measure by memory from a future you can only dream about. Thatched roofs come next. You watch as bundles of reeds are slung up, each handful heavy with last night's rain. The smell is sweet and grassy, a reminder that even here, innovation doesn't erase nature, it just rearranges it. The roof takes shape, golden in the slanting sun, and you tuck stray strands under the eaves, checking for gaps. The whole structure grows more solid with every sweep of your hand. Beneath your feet, the ground is trampled flat, paths already forming where boots and bare toes have passed again and again. You can hear the soft crunch of straw underfoot as you step inside for the first time, ducking beneath a thick lintel, heart thumping with a mix of pride and exhaustion. This is your new shelter. This is the dawn of a different world. Across the muddy yard, children dart between unfinished walls, their shouts bouncing off timber and thatch. Someone hauls a fire-blackened stone into the center of the hall, and you help arrange charred earth and sooty rocks into a rough circle. Soon, a fire crackles, smoke curling up to the rafters. The smell of burning wood is ancient and reassuring. You kneel by the flames, warming your hands, and notice how the hearth draws everyone in. Old and young, tired and curious, they gather close, swapping stories and scraps of food, the flicker of firelight painting their faces with shifting shadows. This hearth is more than just warmth. It is the heart of the hall, marked by layers of blackened soil and stones that have seen 1,000 meals. You watch as someone brings out a clay pot, its sides etched with fingerprints and simple lines. It's heavier than you expect, but it fits perfectly in your hands. You remember shaping the same kind of vessel from wet, gritty earth, pressing thumb and palm until it stood upright. These pots are not just for water. They store barley, dried berries, and the precious drops of honey traded from distant neighbors. With each pot you help fill, you feel the shift. No longer just hunters or foragers, your people are becoming makers, planners, and keepers of plenty. As dusk settles, a hush falls over the settlement. The only sounds are the low murmur of voices and the hiss of embers. You walk the new paths, mud squelching underfoot, and glance back at the glowing hall. It stands out against the darkness, a beacon of everything you have built together. You realize this place is different from any camp or shelter that came before. Here, decisions are made by many, not just one. You sense a new kind of leadership, people working side by side, trusting in each other's strengths, the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Suddenly, in the firelight, a pattern emerges. The homes and hall are not scattered at random. Each is placed with purpose, paths connecting them like the web of a giant spider. You wonder if this is how cities begin, not with stone walls or grand towers, but with timber frames, shared fires, and the silent agreement that cooperation is worth more than conflict. What you see here in Carnusti farmland might be the seed of something that will change what it means to belong. Breathing in the cool night air, you trail your hand along the rough timber, feeling the dampness and the faint warmth left by the sun. The air is thick with the scent of earth and smoke, and you pause, listening to the quiet. Under your boots, you sense the hush of history, the weight of everything that has come before. This is the new story, one built from wood, willpower, and the hope that tomorrow will be even better. You step back, surveying the hall's sturdy frame and the lines of homes stretching into the dark. The village is still small, but every path, every hearth, and every pot points to something bigger stirring beneath the surface. You can almost hear the future calling from beneath the soil. Carnusti farmland, early Neolithic Scotland. You kneel in the churned earth, the grass cool and wet beneath your knees. It's early morning, the kind when mist clings to the ground and your breath comes out in little puffs. Around you, the faint outline of the timber hall rises from the soil, a ghostly grid marked by post holes and darker stains where ancient fires once flickered. You clutch a handful of barley, rough and warm from someone else's palm. A polished flint blade changes hands, sharp and weighty. You can feel the intention in the trade. This is no silent barter. The exchange is threaded with laughter, urgent whispers, and a wordless trust built over seasons. You glance up and realize these early Scots are not isolated. Their clothes are smeared with ochre from the next valley. Their pots bear patterns you do not recognize, as if the clay itself has traveled on someone's back for days. News and pottery styles move along these muddy tracks, arriving with the next group of traders. Farming tricks are passed around the circle like a shared secret, each tip helping someone else's barley grow just a little taller. The timber hall looms behind you, its footprint vast and purposeful. Step inside, and the air changes. The roof beams creak in the wind, heavy with the scent of damp wood and the faint echo of smoke. You run your fingers along a post, rough, splintery, set deep into the ground, so that even now, thousands of years later, there's a sense of stability here. The posts are spaced with mathematical regularity, each one sunk to the same depth, with a care that borders on obsession. You realize this is not a random hut. It is a monument to precision, built for people who understood collaboration and order. As you watch, a group gathers near the fire pit. They sort through baskets of grain and smooth lumps of clay. One figure, eyes sharp, shapes a new pot with a twist you have not seen before. Another, hands caked with mud, swaps tips about planting times. Herding, farming, tool-making, each person has a role, and the rhythms of daily life are choreographed with quiet efficiency. It is not just about survival. There is pride in the work, a sense that every task, from grinding grain to fletching arrows, is part of something bigger. You catch a snatch of song, an old melody that stirs the hairs on your arms. The hall is not only a shelter, it is a beating heart, a place where stories and traditions are exchanged as easily as goods. Outside, the wind picks up. You step out and look across the fields. The land is a patchwork of tilled soil and wild grass, interrupted by distant figures moving along the horizon. You realize that Carnusti is a crossroads, not just for things, but for ideas. Farming practices and pottery designs have journeyed here from far to the south, brought by people who walked for weeks or even months. Migration is not a word they know, but you see it in the way newcomers are welcomed, their dialects blending into the evening stories. The hall stands as a visible sign that this is a gathering point, a place where different groups meet, share what they know, and leave changed. Suddenly, a low rumble draws your attention. Not thunder, but the steady thud of feet. Another group arrives, their faces unfamiliar, but their intentions clear. They carry bundles wrapped in woven reed, each one full of items you have never seen before. For a moment, you are swept up in the energy. The air is thick with the earthy smell of damp soil, the tang of sweat, and the sweet smoky aroma drifting from inside the hall. This is a living network, a web of communities that stretches far beyond the fields you can see. You pause, letting the realization settle. Everything here, the tools, the timber, the songs, has traveled. Nothing is truly local, not anymore. The Carnusti Hall is proof that people came together, shared what they knew, and left their mark on the landscape. This is how traditions spread, how farming techniques improved, how pottery styles evolved. The posts beneath your fingertips are more than wood. They are signposts for a world that is bigger, more connected, and more ambitious than you ever imagined. A single sentence cuts through the noise. The construction of this hall must have required leadership, or at the very least, a way for people to agree and work together. You picture the planning, the arguments, the laughter as each post is hauled upright. This was not just a building. It was a statement, a physical promise that the community would endure. You step back into the hall, dust swirling in the dawn light. The hush is almost sacred. If you close your eyes, you can hear the echoes of ancient fires, the shuffle of feet, the murmur of plans made and secrets traded. The timber under your hand is rough and cool, grounding you in a moment that both is and isn't yours. You sense that what happened here changed everything. You know that discoveries like this could rewrite the story of early British civilization, showing that complex communities thrived in places we once thought were empty. The stakes are clear. Every artifact and every post reshapes what we know about the origins of social life in Europe. And as you trade that last handful of barley for a story, you realize you are standing at a crossroads, not just of paths, but of possibility. The air hums with questions, and the hush beneath your boots is the sound of history waiting to be told. Standing in the hall's shadow, you take in its size and the sheer effort behind each post and beam. Carnusti farmland, sunrise, your boots pressed into the dew-heavy grass, and a low mist curling at your ankles. The year is somewhere around 4000 BC, but for a moment it feels as if you've slipped through a tear in time. You stand at the threshold of a timber hall, so massive that its shadow erases the line between past and present. The air is thick with the earthy tang of freshly turned soil, and as you breathe in, you sense a world on the edge of transformation. This isn't just any building. The timber hall stretches before you, its footprint dominating the gentle rise of this Scottish field. You run your hand along a buried post, oak, ancient, and still surprisingly rough to the touch. The timber is not here by accident. Each log was felled, dragged, and deliberately set deep into the ground, as if the builders meant for their work to last longer than their own lifetimes. The posts are spaced with almost mathematical precision, each standing at a matching depth, so regular you could line up your own shoes and never miss a beat. That kind of planning, it demands more than muscle. It hints at minds working together, at a group united by something bigger than survival. You picture them, a cluster of Neolithic people, faces streaked with sweat and soot, eyes darting from the rising sun to the growing frame of the hall. There's a silent rhythm to their work, the ring of stone axes echoing across the field as they clear the forest, one tree at a time. The axes are polished, their edges catching the weak Scottish light, and each strike sends up a spray of sap and bark. Every shudder in the ground under your feet is a reminder that these ancient workers were not just building shelter, they were carving out a new way of life. The scale of the place is staggering. You step inside, ducking your head beneath the suggestion of a doorway. The interior yawns wide, the air still holding a memory of wood smoke and distant voices. Imagine the effort. Timber beams thicker than your thigh, hoisted upright without the help of pulleys or metal tools. The roof, if it still existed, would have soared high above, sheltering dozens, perhaps more, from the harsh Scottish weather. You trail your fingers across the packed earth floor, feeling the ridges left by ancient feet and the cold imprint of time. What really strikes you, though, is the intent behind every detail. This isn't just a big hut for a big family. The even spacing of posts, the deliberate choice of oak over softer woods, the sheer volume of materials, all point to a society thinking far beyond the next meal or the next winter. Building something of this scale required leaders, organizers, skilled workers, and probably a few persuasive voices to keep everyone on task. You get the sense of a community, maybe even a small town, rallying around a common vision. Here's the twist. Until this hall emerged from the Carnusti soil, nobody thought Neolithic Britain could pull off a project of this magnitude. The old story said, small, scattered groups, barely scraping by. But now, as you stand in this echoing space, that story feels as thin as morning fog. This timber hall is a monument to ambition, to collaboration, and to the power of shared dreams. The consequence is clear. Historians and archaeologists have to rethink what they thought they knew about the birth of complex society in these islands. The evidence is literally under your boots. Oak timbers, some still stained by the fires that once warmed the hall, were laid out with intention, not just wherever they landed. The posts run in parallel lines, forming walls so straight you could use them as a guide for a modern fence. The depth of each post hole tells its own story, measured, repeated, as if following a blueprint passed down by word of mouth. No random piles of wood here. This was architecture with a plan. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sounds of the ancient hall fill your mind. Crackling fire, the low murmur of voices, the clatter of stone tools on timber, The scent of damp earth and smoke is everywhere, mixed with the sharp tang of green wood. You can almost feel the heat of the hearth at your back, the cool draught threading through the gaps in the walls. Every sensory detail wraps around you, reminding you that this was once a living place, pulsing with energy and hope. Outside, the landscape is changing. The forest edge has retreated, replaced by open fields and new clearings. You can still hear the distant thud of axes, the scraping of stone on bark. Clearing this much land was no accident. It took coordination, patience, and a willingness to reshape the world. Each tree felled made room for new crops, for livestock pens, for pathways connecting one family to another. It's not hard to imagine the first glimmers of trade, maybe a flint blade exchanged for a basket of grain, or news of a festival passed along by a traveling neighbor. The stakes are as real as the soil beneath your feet. If this hall stands as proof of early social complexity, if these people were trading, organizing, even leading each other, then the roots of British civilization stretch deeper and wider than anyone guessed. You find yourself asking, what else might lie hidden beneath these fields? What other forgotten chapters are waiting for the right set of eyes and hands to bring them back into the light? A sudden gust rattles the grass, and you are back in the present, but the whole shadow lingers. The air feels charged, as if the land itself remembers every swing of the axe, every shouted order, every shared meal. The timber beneath your fingertips is a bridge across 5,000 years, connecting you to a moment when Scotland's first builders dreamed bigger than anyone ever imagined. Now, the story of Carnusti is no longer just about what was found. It is about what those discoveries mean, and how they might change everything you thought you knew about the dawn of civilization in Europe. Carnusti farmland, afternoon. You and the archaeology team. You pause at the edge of the trench, boots sinking slightly into the peat-rich soil. Overhead, the sky is restless, clouds shifting, sunlight flickering across the rolling fields. The wind brings a whiff of damp earth and the faint, smoky aroma that always seems to linger here, as if the ground itself remembers the warmth of ancient fires. You look down, and the present blurs. The line between now and 4,000 years before the first castle falls away. You find yourself standing inside the Neolithic timber hall, the one just revealed beneath your feet. The posts are massive, oak trunks, each one hand-cut and muscled into place by people whose names we'll never know. You reach out, palm-brushing the rough grain. The wood is cold and ridged, the surface scarred where ancient hands stripped bark and shaped these beams. The structure is surprisingly vast, stretching nearly the length of a city bus. It's not just a home, it's a statement. The very walls press in with purpose, as if to say, we are here and we will last. Take a slow breath. The air is heavy, tinged with the earthy scent of packed clay and the sharper bite of old smoke. In the center, you spot a shallow pit ringed with blackened stones. Charred earth tells its own story, a hearth still echoing with the memory of countless fires that once lit this space. You crouch, fingertips grazing the soot. This is where warmth was made, meals cooked, and stories told in the flickering dark. You can almost hear the low murmur of voices, the crackle of burning wood, the hush that settles over a family at the end of a long hunt. Just outside the circle of firelight, you glimpse movement. A group of Neolithic hunters returns, mud-streaked on their legs, their hands carrying the day's prize, a deer, antlers gleaming. The forest that once ringed this farmland was dense and wild, home to boar and red deer. You imagine the chase, the rush through bracken, the relief of success as the hunters stride home, greeted by the smoke curling from the hall's roof. Step back, and the scene shifts again. The excavation site is alive with activity. One archaeologist kneels over a cluster of timbers, brushing away soil with a practiced flick. The oak beams are not random. They have been placed with intention, set in deep slots cut through layers of clay and gravel. You watch as they uncover the pattern, a rectangle, each post aligned with care. The layout is deliberate, not the result of a storm or a flood, but of human hands and human planning. Here comes a twist. Despite all the technology at your disposal, ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, digital mapping, the first clue that something unnatural lay beneath this field was not a trace of pottery or a telltale artifact. It was a strange, repeating pattern in the soil, a geometric ghost that refused to match any known geological formation. The regularity was unnerving, like finding a fingerprint where only nature should leave chaos. What does that mean? It means you're not just looking at another ancient ruin. You've stumbled onto a structure that doesn't fit the old models. These patterns challenge the idea that Neolithic Scotland was a scatter of isolated huts. Instead, here is proof of planning, of vision, of a community bold enough to build big and build for the future. You stand upright, the present returning in a rush. The dig team murmurs in the background, notebooks snap shut, and the distant whir of a tractor cuts through the afternoon quiet. Yet beneath your souls, the hall endures, a silent witness to the ambitions of its builders. Let yourself linger for a moment. The hush that follows each discovery is almost reverent. You realize that this site is more than a collection of wood and stone. It's a portal, a bridge that connects your life to theirs, separated by thousands of years but joined by the same soil and the same dreams. You picture the first families here, children's laughter echoing beneath the rafters, elders tending the fire, hunters returning at dusk. The earthy smell of damp timber and the faint tang of peat smoke bind you to them across time. Every element uncovered, the posts, the hearth, the patterned soil, raises a new possibility. What other secrets still lie hidden beneath these rolling Scottish fields? What other stories wait for the right question, the right shovel, the next muddy pair of boots? For a heartbeat, you feel the weight of history pressing gently on your shoulder. It is an invitation, not a burden. This is the change. You now see prehistoric Scotland, not as a blank, silent landscape, but as a living canvas, shaped by hands as clever and hopeful as your own. The Carnusti Timber Hall is no longer a mystery. It is a message, enduring and clear. Here people gathered. Here they dared to dream beyond the horizon. You step back into the present, boots brushing the same earth where Neolithic hands once built and dreamed. the wind carries a hint of peat and memory. The Carnusti discovery leaves you wondering what other secrets lie beneath these fields, waiting for curious minds and muddy shoes. In short, the story of prehistoric Scotland is still being written, maybe by you one day.